You know, what's interesting about you both now is you have a connective thread, one of the most transcendent players in the history of women's basketball in Caitlin Clark. And it's her birthday today. You guys both shouted her out.
Yes.
Okay, so Drew and Aaliyah, you can catch them there on the right side.
Side of your screen from Coach, and then Aaliyah doing a matchup of pictures, which is really sweet.
Lisa Bluder just dropped some real talk about what coaching Caitlin Clark was actually like. And trust me, her response hits way deeper than you'd think. This Iowa coaching legend didn't hold back one bit. She dove into the intensity, the madness, and all those behind-the-curtain moments that nobody ever witnessed. This whole discussion shows us a completely different angle of the Clark phenomenon that fans were never clued into. And honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing. Jump into the comments right now and let me know. Do you believe Lisa Bluder should get way more recognition for turning Caitlin Clark into the phenomenon she is today? Or was Clark already destined for greatness regardless of who coached her?
I love this for you guys because you guys are both still really close. Obviously, Aaliyah as a current teammate, but how close are you still, Coach, to Caitlin?
Oh, I talk to her quite often. You know, I follow all of her successes and everything. I just always want to be in her camp and support her. I have so much admiration for her, for what she has really not only just accomplished, but what she's handled in her young 24 years of.
Listen, Lisa Bluder recently had this interview where she got completely honest about the reality of coaching Caitlin Clark during her Iowa years. And I'm telling you, this wasn't your typical coach speak, where they throw around meaningless compliments about how wonderful everything was. Bluder actually delivered some real substance here, some genuine perspective on what that whole journey looked like. And the truth is, it was way more intense and complicated than most people could ever imagine. Let me paint the picture for you first. Bluder was Clark's coach for her entire 4-year run at Iowa, spanning from 2020 all the way through 2024. Throughout those years, Clark transformed into the most electrifying and talked about figure in women's college basketball history. She shattered scoring records left and right, packed arenas to capacity, and literally put Iowa basketball on a level they had never experienced before. And during this entire whirlwind, Bluder was right there in the eye of the storm, trying to manage what was essentially a 3-ring circus.
I told her today, your 20s have been pretty good to you.
I would say so. Yeah, they've been transformative, I would say, to say.
During this recent interview, Bluder mentioned how she maintains regular contact with Clark even now. She explained that chat frequently, and she keeps up with all of Clark's achievements, which sounds pretty typical for most coach relationships. But then she dropped something really compelling. She opened up about having tremendous respect for Clark, not just because of her basketball accomplishments, but because of everything she's navigated during her short 24 years on this planet. That phrase right there tells the whole story. Everything she's navigated. Managing Caitlin Clark went far beyond just basketball fundamentals. It meant handling a complete media explosion. It meant dealing with attention levels that were completely off the charts, along with criticism, intense scrutiny, and pressure that was absolutely relentless. And Bluder experienced every single moment of that chaos firsthand. Bluder even cracked a joke with Clark on her birthday, telling her that her 20s have treated her pretty well, which honestly might be the biggest understatement ever recorded. Clark's 20s have been absolutely out of this world. She transformed from a college newcomer to the biggest name in women's basketball across just 4 incredible years. She demolished records that everyone thought were untouchable forever. She brought mainstream spotlight to women's college basketball at a level nobody had achieved since those dominant UConn championship runs. But here's the part that doesn't get enough attention. Throughout this entire phenomenon, Lisa Bluder was the person who actually had to coach her day in and day out. Not just work on basketball fundamentals, but guide her growth as both a player and a human being while the entire sporting universe was dissecting every single decision she made. That goes way beyond normal coaching responsibilities. That's operating in completely uncharted territory. Just imagine what Bluder was juggling every single day. Every single game was completely sold out. National media outlets were covering Iowa constantly because of Clark's presence. Opposing teams were designing entire game plans specifically around stopping her, sometimes assigning 2 or 3 defenders to shadow her for entire games. The expectations for Clark to deliver were absolutely enormous. And naturally, the pressure on Bluder to create situations where Clark could thrive was equally massive.
I was so happy for Aaliyah when Caitlin went to Indiana because I knew you were going to reap a lot of those passes down the court and she was going to feed you the ball. And I just think you guys are such a dynamic duo.
This wasn't a situation where Clark was some bench player who occasionally had decent performances. She was the absolute center of everything Iowa did when they had the ball. Their entire offensive system revolved completely around her abilities. When she struggled, Iowa typically came up short. When she was clicking, they could compete with anyone in the country. That's an incredible amount of pressure for any college athlete to handle, and it represents enormous responsibility for any coach to manage effectively. Bluder also had to navigate all the criticism that kept coming. Clark's direction, particularly during her final 2 seasons when the media attention reached absolutely insane levels. People were endlessly debating whether Clark was living up to the hype, whether her style was too individual-focused, whether she prioritized personal statistics over team victories. And serving as her coach, Bluder had to help her work through all that external noise while simultaneously trying to win basketball games and continue developing every other player on the roster. What really stands out about Bluder's recent comments is how she specifically highlighted her respect for how Clark managed everything that came her way. That indicates there were definitely times when things got really difficult. Times when the expectations became overwhelming. Times when Clark was probably fighting through the constant attention and the never-ending pressure. And Bluder was present for every bit of it, supporting her through those challenges while also attempting to run an entire basketball program. The dynamic between Bluder and Clark is really unique because it wasn't your standard coach-player situation. Clark wasn't simply a skilled player who needed some guidance and development. She was a once-in-a-generation talent who was literally rewriting history books and transforming the entire women's college basketball landscape. Bluder had to learn how to coach someone operating at that level without limiting her natural instincts or restricting her game-changing impact. And honestly, Bluder handled that challenge incredibly well. She gave Clark the space to be herself. She didn't force her into some restrictive system that would have held back her incredible ability. She constructed the offensive approach around what Clark did best, and allowed her the creative freedom to make spectacular plays happen. That requires serious confidence as a coach, because when things go wrong, you're the person who takes the heat for giving your superstar too much control. There's also the challenge of keeping the rest of your team engaged and motivated while one player dominates all the media coverage. Iowa had several other really talented contributors who played crucial roles in their success. Players like Monica Chinano, Kate Martin, Gabby Marshall, and Hannah Stuelke all made significant impacts. Bluder had to ensure those players continued feeling appreciated and essential even though virtually all the press attention focused on Clark. That requires incredible balance and judgment. And from everything we observed, she managed it really effectively.
Interesting watching her final season in college with you here at the desk and then watching your relationship develop at the professional level.
Yeah, honestly, it has been so great. It's always so weird when you play against someone and then you are on the same team and building that relationship. But I think just over the past 2 years, it's been amazing. From the first time she got to Indy and us just building that relationship on the court, off the court, honestly, that's my...
The discussion also explored the connection between Clark and Aaliyah Boston, who now play together on the Indiana Fever. What makes that relationship particularly interesting is how it demonstrates that the personal connections Clark developed during college have translated seamlessly into her professional career. Bluder definitely contributed to molding Clark into someone who could form those meaningful relationships with teammates, including players she used to compete against in college.
Elite. So when you met up with each other, of course, you got all your college history, but then does it not take too long to recognize, hey, this is somebody that is like-minded like me, skilled like me, and can elevate my game to a level that I haven't
Yeah, I mean,
you had a
you know that from
fantastic
playing
season last
against
season.
her. You know that from playing against her, just how competitive she is in that nature. And so to be on the same team, it honestly continues to motivate you because you guys want to be great for each other. And I feel like that's how we play. Like every time we step on the floor, we give each other our pregame hugs, and she says you're going to be amazing because you are amazing, and I say back, but it's just that confidence that Caitlin just continues to make you feel, and then you...
Boston described how Clark constantly encourages her and helps her feel more confident when they're playing together. That's a leadership quality that Clark developed somewhere along the way, and much of that probably stems from the team culture that Bluder established at Iowa, an environment where players genuinely supported one another and worked to elevate each other's games. That kind of chemistry doesn't just happen naturally. It comes from deliberate coaching and strong leadership from the top. Bluder also had to live with the harsh reality that Iowa never captured a national championship during Clark's entire tenure there. They reached the title game twice, in both 2023 and 2024, and came up short both times. That has to eat at you as a coach. When you have the most dominant player in the sport, potentially the greatest player in women's college basketball history, and you still can't deliver that championship ring. That's something that will probably stay with Bluder forever, despite the fact that she coached brilliantly and put Iowa in the best possible position to succeed. The reality that Iowa couldn't win it all with Clark has sparked some criticism directed at Bluder's coaching approach. Some people have questioned her strategic decisions, her player rotations, and her ability to make crucial adjustments during games. And that criticism seems pretty unfair because she was working with the talent she had available and did an amazing job maximizing what that group could accomplish. But that's just the reality when you're coaching a player of Clark's caliber. Everyone's expectations become completely unrealistic, and anything less than cutting down the nets gets labeled as disappointing. What's really telling is that Bluder chose to retire immediately after Clark graduated. She spent 24 years coaching Iowa and decided to step away right when the Clark era came to an end. That timing definitely wasn't random or coincidental. Coaching Clark was almost certainly the absolute pinnacle of her entire career, and she understood that whatever came afterward couldn't possibly measure up to what they had just experienced. So she decided to walk away while she was still at the peak, or at least as close to the peak as you can get without actually winning that elusive championship. Bluder's observation about Clark's 20s being pretty successful shows that she fully grasps just how extraordinary these past few years have been. Clark recently turned 24, which means her entire adult existence has been defined by basketball stardom and celebrity. She became a household name at 20. She started breaking records at 21 and 22. She got selected first overall in the draft and became a professional sensation at 20. And now at 24, she's already established herself as one of the most recognizable figures in the entire history of women's basketball. That's an absolutely incredible rise to prominence, and Bluder was right there guiding her through the college portion of that journey. The relationship between any coach and a generational talent is always compelling because both people depend on each other in completely different ways. Clark needed Bluder to provide the framework and guidance to develop into the superstar she eventually became, and Bluder needed Clark to take her program to unprecedented heights and solidify her own legacy as one of the elite coaches in women's college basketball history. It was definitely a relationship that benefited both parties, but that doesn't mean it was simple or stress-free. Bluder probably experienced plenty of moments where she felt completely drained by the relentless attention and pressure that followed them everywhere. Moments where she probably wished she could just focus on coaching basketball without having every single decision scrutinized by national media outlets. Moments where she might have questioned whether all the chaos surrounding Clark was actually worth dealing with. But then Clark would go out and score 40 points in some incredible performance, and suddenly everything made perfect sense again. It's also important to remember that Bluder guided Clark through some absolutely heartbreaking moments during their time together. That 2023 national championship loss to LSU was devastating for everyone involved. The 2024 loss to South Carolina was even more crushing because everyone knew it represented Iowa's final opportunity with Clark on the roster. Bluder had to help Clark work through those disappointing defeats and find ways to move forward, which isn't easy when the entire basketball world is watching and analyzing how she responds to adversity. The respect that Bluder expressed for how Clark handled all the pressure and attention suggests there were definitely moments when things could have gone completely off the rails. Moments when the expectations could have become too much to handle. Moments when she could have buckled under all that weight and pressure, but somehow she never did. And a significant part of that mental toughness probably came from the support system and environment that Bluder created at Iowa. Bluder also had to deal with constant criticism of Clark's playing style and approach to the game. Critics said she dominated the ball too much. They claimed she didn't do enough to make her teammates better players. They argued that she cared more about padding her statistics than winning games. As Clark's coach, Bluder had to defend her publicly while also potentially having some honest conversations with her privately about areas where she could continue improving. That puts you in a really difficult position because you want to support and protect your player, but you also have to be completely honest about things she needs to work on. The fact that Bluder and Clark still communicate regularly demonstrates that their relationship survived all the intense pressure of those 4 years together. Many coach-player relationships naturally fade away once the playing days end, but Bluder and Clark obviously developed something much deeper and more meaningful than that. They experienced something completely unique together, something that nobody else will ever fully understand or appreciate. And going through that created a lasting bond that has continued well beyond their time at Iowa. When you look back at everything now, Bluder's years coaching Clark were probably the most challenging and fulfilling period of her entire coaching career. She coached a player who literally changed the game and brought attention to women's college basketball that had never existed before. She helped develop someone who became a genuine cultural phenomenon, not just another talented basketball player. And she accomplished all of that while dealing with more pressure and media scrutiny than most college coaches will ever have to face in their entire careers. The conversation also showed how Clark continues to positively impact everyone around her, even after moving on from Iowa. Aaliyah Boston talked about how Clark makes her feel confident and incredible every time they step onto the court as teammates. That speaks to the kind of person Clark has become, and much of that character development happened during her years working with Bluder at Iowa. What made Bluder's comments particularly meaningful was that they weren't overly dramatic or sentimental. She didn't get emotional or go overboard talking about how special Clark was as a player. She simply acknowledged the reality of what coaching her was actually like, expressing admiration for everything she accomplished and everything she managed to handle. That measured approach actually makes her words carry much more weight and significance. The complexity of their coaching relationship comes through clearly in that kind of honest reflection. When everything is said and done, Lisa Bluder coached the most famous and impactful women's college basketball player of this entire generation and played a crucial role in helping her become everything she represents today. That's a legacy that will be connected to Bluder for the rest of her life. And based on everything she's said recently, it sounds like she feels genuinely proud of what they accomplished together, even though that championship ring they both wanted so badly never materialized. So that's the real story here. Lisa Bluder gave us genuine insight into what coaching Caitlin Clark was really like, and her perspective shows just how complex and demanding that experience actually was. If you're looking for more in-depth analysis of women's basketball stories that go beyond the surface-level coverage, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment and tell me what you think was Bluder's most important contribution to Clark's incredible career development.